staging of breast cancer and survival, right? So I briefly talked about this. Like I said, in stage 0, you hardly see anything. It's inside the cell, the changes are begin to happen, and you're not going to feel any lump, you're not going to feel a mass. It's there, but you don't know about it absolutely. When it comes to stage 1, then we see a small nodule. Now, unless you're self-examining regularly and the nodule is of a certain size, women are going to miss it. They're not going to little bigger, and then it starts spreading to the local lymph nodes. Stage 3, further spread, and the survival rates with these stages. At stage 0 and stage 1, if we can find these cancer nodules, then the woman has a 100% chance of survival. The 5-year survival rate is 100%. But once they reach to stage 2, that starts to slowly come down to 87%. Stage 3, 60, sometimes even as little as 28, 27%. Stage 4, definitely 20s is where the survival rate is. So the survival rate goes down as we diagnose cancer later and later. So it is paramount that we must diagnose cancer, or rather breast cancer, as early as possible. The later we diagnose it, and the more chance that it will go into an irreversible stage, risk to life becomes very high. Okay, so what is the burden of the disease, right? Let's look at the world. Across the world, the breast cancer is most frequently diagnosed cancer in women. And the orange that you're seeing is all breast cancer. The green are the other cancers. If you notice India on the map, well, it's all orange. That's a lot of breast cancer being diagnosed in India. But it's not as high in incidence as some of the other countries, yes? Because if you look at the color legend that's on the side, India is at number 4, between 22.4 to 31 incidence, as compared to some other countries like in North America, Europe, Scandinavian countries, very, very high incidence of breast cancer. India is on the map, but not as high as some of the other countries. But mind you, we are growing. We're growing in incidence. More and more women in India are getting diagnosed with breast cancer. But that's not a problem. The problem comes when they are diagnosed late. For instance, if in high-income countries where people are more focused on screening, more focused on early treatment, the survival rate is as high as 80%. But in low-income countries, and unfortunately India comes somewhere in between, the survival rate only is about 40%, right? So if we diagnose 20 women, a lot of them are not going to survive. Yes, so that's not a nice thing to happen. So you're only going to have 8 people surviving and about 12 people are going to die, right? So that's not nice. And that's primarily because we're not diagnosing it early. Let's look at the burden of disease in India. So when we look at India, breast cancer in India is the most common cancer among women in India and accounts for 27% of all cancers in women in India. It's huge. It's the leader in cancers when it comes to India. Collectively, the US, India, and China account for almost 1/3 of the global breast cancer cases in the world. Yes, so that's a huge number. So when we move on and look at some other numbers, breast cancer mortality rate in India is 1.6 to 1.7 times higher than maternal mortality rate. So previously, unfortunately, during childbirth, a few women used to die. Thankfully, now with more detection, antenatal screening, finding problems, better tests being done for pregnant women, and also hospitalized deliveries, we are reducing that. But breast cancer continues to rise. Yes, in rural areas in India, the survival rate is only about 8%. The detection rate or mortality to incidence rate, incidence to mortality rate in rural India is as high as 66%, if I'm not wrong. If 100 women are diagnosed, 66% of them are going to die. But if you come to the urban area, the cities of India, about 8% die. So we are still able to save 92% of women who get diagnosed with breast cancer in urban areas. But in rural areas, a lot of women die. That 66% of women die. And overall, in India, 1 in 28 women are likely to develop breast cancer during their lifetime. And that's a large number by any stretch of imagination. So traditionally, in our country, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Delhi have been leading in the incidence of breast cancer. But in Bangalore, now when we say that the incidence is increasing, we are talking about the number of tests done in Bangalore and people getting recognized with the disease. Bangalore has a large migrant population. I'm not talking about people who come for laborers, but also the IT crowd that's there. A lot of people come into Bangalore and they work, and it's a very educated crowd, which is by and by getting more and more aware. That is number one. So they are going in for tests, and the detection rate is rising. Number two, as we get more career oriented, we are delaying children, sometimes not having children. We are, because of our time compulsions, our women are not breastfeeding sometimes and finding alternatives for that. And these are risk factors for cancer. But yes, Bangalore is still a physically active crowd. I don't see so much of a sedentary lifestyle in Bangalore. A lot of people are active and try to work out. But yes, if obesity and physical inactivity is there, it's also could act as a factor. But I feel it's more of the fact that there's more educated crowd who are going in for screening early, and also the fact that people are delaying families, avoiding breastfeeding. This is probably adding to what's happening in the incidence of breast cancer at Bangalore. In overall numbers, we're not number one, but our growth is definitely number one. So that's what's